All right. So today we're going to talk about Iron Man, the first movie from back in 2008. The director was Jon Favreau, who also starred as Happy Hogan. Um, First impressions, Dan, of the movie, the movie itself.
My first impressions of the movie were, oh my fucking god,
Yeah,
really?
pretty much.
I mean, it came out in a time where comic book, we had, what, X-Men?
Sam Raimi's Spider-Man movies.
Spider-Man. I mean,
Yep.
great movies.
Yeah.
You know, they were great movies, but Iron Man, for me, kicked it up to a next level for a character at the time who was considered maybe a B-tier character.
Yeah, definitely a B-level character at the time.
We think about that now, and that's ridiculous.
Yeah,
You know,
it
say
doesn't
Iron Man
seem-
was a B-tier character.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like Iron Man should have been a B-tier character, but that's now, 12 years after the fact when this movie came out. I remember first hearing about Iron Man coming out and thinking, why would you start with him?
Yeah.
I know that there had already been, an attempt for a Hulk movie that didn't land.
Ang Lee's,
I mean, it gets a lot of hate but it also gets a lot of love. It was definitely visually groundbreaking with some of the things that they did. But I remember thinking when I first heard that this movie was going to be made was why Iron Man, and then I heard about the casting and I heard why Robert Downey Jr. I really did. I was one of those people that wasn't super on board with Robert Downey Jr. I don't know how you felt
I
about
was
it.
the exact opposite.
You were totally
Yeah,
on board?
I
Totally on
absolutely
board.
thought it was perfect casting.
Okay. At that time, because of everything that you had known about Robert Downey Jr. up to that time, for me, I thought I just see it as being a train wreck. And I didn't know
A lot
that-
of people felt that way.
Yeah, a lot. And I also didn't know that Jon Favreau had directed up until that point. I just thought that he was an actor. I thought, maybe the only thing that I knew that he might have directed was, I think he directed the movie Swingers.
Swingers.
So I knew about that, but I did not know that he was more than just like a comedic actor.
Well, he did the Daredevil train wreck as well. He was the director on that.
Did he? I did not know that he directed that.
Yeah,
That is a movie that we shall not.
that's a whole nother reason why it potentially might not have worked.
Yeah,
So
see,
if you
I
think
didn't,
about it,
I didn't even know that. I just wanted to know why Iron Man. Why would you start with Iron Man? Because in my head, I didn't know that they were going to go forward and build an entire universe out of this. But I thought if there was a potential for it, why Iron Man? Looking back on it now, 2008, that movie came out. I was sitting in the theaters, and I saw Robert Downey Jr. The intro was just him. I think he's getting an award. They're talking about him, and he doesn't show up. And I thought, oh,
You're right.
that's pretty much spot on for Robert Downey Jr.
yeah. And I think actually Marvel was smart about that. They played off some of the, is Robert Downey Jr. reliable?
Absolutely.
They use that to their advantage.
They
if you look
pretty
back
much-
and you see stuff like that, just little things, I think they nailed it. They nailed it perfectly.
Yeah, I think that his former experiences and his attitude towards certain things, I think kind of pushed the Tony Stark character in the right direction to the Tony Stark that we eventually got, which was, I mean, you can even see it throughout the movie. He's just very cocky, but but cocky to a point where he knows that he's confident because he's that good, because he's that smart. He goes and he tests the weapon. Oh, maybe that was the beginning. He actually tested the weapon, wasn't it? The Jericho.
You're right. You're right.
tested the
It was.
Jericho
I
weapon,
just
and he's talking
rewatched
about
the
it.
movies too. Yeah, I think it starts off with them in the
Humvees.
Humvees and then cuts back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you do get to see like a little bit of that like cocky personality when he's talking to the airmen in
He's
the
doing the
Humvees.
take a picture. Can I take a picture? That type of thing.
Please
Yeah.
no peace signs. Yeah. But you even see, I feel like you see Robert Downey Jr. in that character easily progress and become more comfortable on screen as that character. I feel like you see it right before your eyes with him literally becoming Tony Stark, and now RDJ and Tony Stark, those two names are synonymous. You're not gonna-
I wouldn't think of anybody else playing him.
there's absolutely no
Yeah.
way that I could fathom anyone else playing Tony
Yeah.
Stark.
And you think about some of the other names that were thrown around for playing him, like Leonardo DiCaprio.
Yeah.
Nick Cage was in there at one
Cage.
point.
Yeah.
But
Just how much of a
Tom
different
Cruise, of course.
Yeah, how different a movie it would have been had it not been Robert Downey Jr.
Yeah.
And I'm so happy that that's who we got. Speaking of easily replaceable characters, we have Terrence Howard as Rhodey. He did have probably one of my favorite lines in the movie towards the end of the movie where he looks at that Mark II silver suit before Tony upgraded it and gave it the hot rod paint job. He turns around and he looks at it and he says, "Next time, baby."
Yeah.
Hinting that War Machine is coming.
Machine was coming.
And then the next time we see Rhodey, when we see, the character evolving into War Machine, it's Don Cheadle.
Don Cheadle. And he has a great line, too, on his first introduction where he's like, yeah, I'm here, deal with it.
Yeah, pretty much. Again, we'll talk about that when
we'll
we
get to Iron Man
when we get to Iron Man 2. And then Jon Favreau as Happy Hogan, as, the security liaison that he likes to put it, because he doesn't want to just be, the chauffeur or whatever. But he's more than that. He's Tony's friend. He's like his confidant, his pal. Pretty much everything runs through Happy or Pepper. Gwyneth Paltrow, I thought was pretty good casting. Up to that point, I wasn't a huge fan of Gwyneth.
Neither was I.
I feel like a lot of her stuff to me was forgettable because it wasn't in like the type of genres that I like to watch. She didn't do like action movies. She did like romantic comedies or dramas.
Exactly. I feel like if out of all of the Marvel movies that we're going to review or just talk about in general, this is one that we agree most upon. Because I know for a fact we've talked about it before. There's some of those movies we don't agree anything about. So we'll get into that too.
But between cast that obviously Jon Favreau was the director, but playing Happy and then casting Gwyneth Paltrow as Pepper, I thought that she looked almost exactly like her comics book counterpart.
Yeah.
And she was perfect. She had that she was definitely like in charge of the day-to-day operations. She was
running the business.
She was his assistant, but more than his assistant.
Running the business.
Yeah. And she was also kind of awkward. Like their interactions were always a little awkward. She was either very forceful with him, or you could also tell that there was like a love building that was mostly on her end, and she kind of didn't want anybody to know about it, specifically when they were at the party, and she got all awkward when they were like dancing, and when he went and got her a drink and all
she
that.
was embarrassed that people were going to talk about her as like the company slut, basically.
But again, like perfect casting. Couldn't picture anyone else in the role of Pepper. I really think that she nailed it all the way through the end, from Iron Man to Avengers Endgame. Eventually becoming Rescue at the very end. Wasn't super thrilled with the armor that she had. I didn't really particularly like the color.
I loved it. I thought it was great.
I like the style of it. I don't know if I particularly like the color of the Rescue armor. I thought that it was too dark for a movie that was already filmed with dark hues. Like she didn't stick out enough.
I hear you. I completely disagree.
Well, again,
I think it was it was beautiful. I thought it was perfect. It was it just looked right to me. The sleekness of the uniform, the mask being slightly different in the back to fit her hair.
Yeah.
They put a little attention to detail in there that I thought was excellent.
And again, like we've talked about this, we're not always going to agree on things, and sometimes it's a little stupid.
That's what's going to make it fun.
Like the color of the Rescue armor. Now we get to, I think, one of my favorite people in this movie, Jeff Bridges as Obadiah Stane. Absolutely love the dude in this role. I don't think they could have chosen a better person to be Obadiah Stane. Again, the casting here for me was basically spot on, except for old Rhodey. Again, he's not a bad actor. I thought Terrence Howard is a very good actor. I was more happy with Don Cheadle in that role.
He's a better actor to start with.
But also, I think he's a little bit more comedic, and he was kind of like the number two. He was like his straight man, but he had to be funny about being Tony Stark's straight man.
Yeah.
Like, he was the kind of guy that kept him in check, but he had to be a little funny about it. Yeah. Kind of like the foil to the straight man.
Just going back to Obadiah Stane, though, I mean, I don't agree with that, what you said about him being perfect. I feel like that is one of the roles that you basically could have gotten any grumpy old white guy to play, and it would have been good.
Yeah, but...
you could have put Billy Bob Thornton in that role, and it would have been just as good.
But here's the thing. Jeff Bridges
I know a lot of people aren't going to agree with that.
Jeff Bridges is a big guy, and he's physically imposing on his own.
You're right.
On his own, he's a big guy, physically imposing, very oversized. And I think that when I look at him, he looked like he fit that part. Like he fit that that number 2 in the company. You know, he sat on the board of directors.
Yeah, I see what you're
was-
saying. And he was great in the movie. I absolutely think he was great in the movie. I just feel, that is the one role that I think you can interchange.
Okay, and hey, like I said, we're not always going to agree. You also get Sean Tube as Yinsen, and it was a different Yinsen from what anybody who's read the comics and has seen that particular storyline before about how Tony Stark became Iron Man after being, captured and everything. Instead of being an Asian guy, which he originally was, and I think that I'm correct that it was technically supposed to be like a Vietnamese. I don't think that they called it Vietnamese.
Yeah,
it was something
Timbo
totally different.
Petet or something like that.
But I believe it was supposed to be similar to Vietnam during the during the Cold War type era, where we were having conflict with Vietnam. But they changed it to fit the current political climate of the time in 2008, which we were, balls deep in a war in the Middle East, which we're still there. So they made everything revolve more around the Middle East. They created a whole new nation called Gulmira, which is where this Yinsen was from.
In Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Yeah, Gulmira.
Yeah. So it was, they switched it. I think they switched it for the better to fit what was currently happening.
That was
time.
a great choice.
Yeah.
That was great. And for him to go back to, a Vietnam type country would make absolutely no sense.
Especially because now in 2008, like I said, we're, in the middle of a war, which we're still in, and Tony Stark and Stark Industries, they were weapons manufacturers. And what at that time in 2008, what did we need any kind of weapons manufacturers for if it wasn't for the war in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Kuwait and Pakistan? So they switched it from originally being, Asian nations or, anything to do with Russia, and they switched it out and made it totally about the Middle East. They even took the 10 Rings organization that was shown in there, which would eventually be shown again in Iron Man 3, which is now going to be in the Shang-Chi movie.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to show the actual 10 Rings, the actual legend.
Super excited for that. Super excited for the real Mandarin.
Yes, finally, we've gotten 2 attempts at it in one movie, and it was horrible.
I can't tell you, and we'll get into it with Iron Man 3, but that
if
is...
If it had just been Ben Kingsley and that wasn't a throwaway, I still think that would have been more acceptable than what we actually got.
Guy Pearce.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that. We'll get there.
But Sean Tube is a very good actor. He wasn't in it for very long. He was only in it literally during the building montage of Tony creating that first Mark I scrap together armor that he made from the missiles that he was currently there selling.
He provides probably the most important role in the movie.
Yeah.
He provides the motivation.
The 100% the motivation. Yeah. Sacrifices himself in a way. He explains, that he wanted to leave the cave so he could go meet his family. And then we find out that his whole family was dead because of this organization. When they kidnapped him, his family was slaughtered. And he tells Tony, I'm going to go meet my family. And it's kind of like a very heartbreaking, poignant moment. But you realize that his life was about...
Yinsen.
Yeah.
I don't think he was Ho.
I don't think it was Ho, but that's what he was in the comics.
Yeah, you're right.
Yinsen. But Yinsen was going to meet his family, and it provided more of a reason for Tony to go out there and kick some ass.
Yeah.
And he really did with that homemade, not homemade, cave-made Mark I suit, which was... when I saw him burst out of the cave and light up the flamethrowers, I was just blown away with how they could take a suit that's made out of scraps and make it look that cool, even though it's not supposed to look cool. It's supposed to look kind of bad. Yeah. Because they put it together on the fly.
And it is. It's a little rough.
It's definitely rough, but
by design.
Come on. Yeah. Come on. When he popped out of that cave, tell me the nerd in you a little bit didn't weep a little bit.
It was one of those moments where you're like, it's still early in the movie, and you're like, okay, we're in for a ride.
Yeah. It's in the first act of the whole movie.
45 minutes.
And from that point on, this is
going to be something.
This is where this movie totally launches.
Yeah.
And it does. It picks up a whole, more than one notch from there, because then he comes back and he creates the new suit and, talks about shutting down Stark Industries as a weapons manufacturer. And you see a new evolution of Tony where he wants to take this suit and use it for good. And you get, the first flight, you get the whole, another montage of him and that, the robot dummy that just
Yeah.
keeps spraying
Oh,
him
yeah.
down with. And again, it's a funny scene. It's funny because he's got this one machine that is like got some errant software in it or something that the AI is bad, and it
But
just
I mean, why? Why was it bad? I mean, if he's, you have to think maybe he's
Personally-
keeping that robot dumb for a reason.
personally, you know what I think it was? I think it was Jarvis messing with him.
Maybe.
I always thought that it'd be funny if Dummy, which was that particular robot
The arm robot
that kept spraying him with the flavor,
messes everything up, almost kills him at one point.
Yeah. I always thought that it would be really funny if there was some sort of backstory where Jarvis kept doing that on purpose just to try to mess with Tony.
If you found out later.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would have been good.
Like a little one shot where you find out, because they did they started doing the one shots and everything. Find out later that Jarvis was just basically trying to mess with
Jarvis
Tony.
was just messing with Tony. I like it.
Yeah. I like for me in my head that always made sense and I thought it was hilarious. But even the second building montage of him trying to get the new suit right is hilarious because he tries to take off when he puts the boots on with the repulsors and he gets like launched back.
Launches him into the wall. Yeah, it's like a split-second frame. He's in the wall.
But
He
then-
starts it off. If you notice, and he starts it off at like 10% power.
Yeah. So
You know?
so that tells you like right there that this suit that he's making is one crazy overpowered, but two,
But I mean,
he's that brilliant that like even 10% power is just too much. And
that
he-
absolutely fits Tony Stark, who Tony Stark is as well, because he's not gonna do baby steps.
Yeah.
He's we're gonna fly before we can walk. That
Literally,
type of
and that's
thing.
exactly
and that's
what he says. Gotta
Yeah,
fly
yeah.
before we can
So
walk.
of course he wouldn't start it off at 1%.
1%, yeah.
He's gotta.
He actually had to
step it up.
scale himself back in order to get it right.
And that's part of the learning montage where he finally realizes, all right, I have to walk before I
well, it's
can
also
fly.
a big
But he
part of
does.
the evolution of Tony where he realizes that he has to scale things back in order to get it right to make it do what he wants to do because he's been an overachiever his whole life and he realized that he kind of has to underachieve a little bit just to actually achieve what he's trying to accomplish.
Right.
He has to pull back and it's a hard lesson for him to learn that he has to scale back.
Right.
And then so the first flight, when you see the first flight in the silver suit,
At that point, he's still testing the limits after he's bounced himself into the wall when he wants to take his new suit that he's never flown before into the stratosphere.
Yep.
He's
and he ices
trying
up.
his patience, or
And
he's testing himself.
Yeah, and he ices up immediately. It's the higher he gets, he ices up. Jarvis locks up. His AI is completely gone. All of his heads-up display is completely gone, and that becomes something very important later on against Obadiah Stane.
Yep.
They're fighting, they're flying, they're going up, and he says, "Did you ever solve the icing
The
problem?"
icing issue problem.
And Obadiah Stane says, "What icing problem?" And then that's it. He just plummets back down.
And then you have Ironmonger crashing to Earth. Presumably, you think he's dead.
Yeah,
at
which
that
he's
time,
not because
but
it doesn't. Of course,
He's got to come back.
Yeah. But we also get the first appearance of something that goes on to be extremely important until I would say they kind of lose their importance after Captain America: Civil War or Winter Soldier, when you find out that everyone's technically like half is Hydra, but we get Shield for the first time.
Yeah.
And I feel like they kind of lost their importance a little bit after that, after Winter Soldier.
Yeah, because it negates everything in the first Iron Man movie, where you're like, Shield. I mean, it's Shield. It's the greatest.
Strategic Homeland Intervention Enforcement Logistics Division. But we get Agent Coulson for the first time, which was not a throwaway character. It probably should have been, and I think that maybe that's what they were leaning towards, was just they wanted a face for S.H.I.E.L.D. without it being Fury yet. They didn't want to go ahead and throw in Nick Fury yet. But we get Agent Coulson, and he becomes basically the running face of S.H.I.E.L.D. from all the way from there to when we get to Avengers, and he technically
I mean,
dies.
that's another one of those Yinsen moments as well. When he dies, he's the whole reason they're the Avengers.
Yeah.
They're avenging him.
Yeah, so again, we'll get to that. We'll get to where Coulson leaves the MCU. But what it does is instead of him being a throwaway character, he pops up in almost every movie. In some way, shape, or form, he's in almost every single movie. And
Up until Avengers, yeah.
well, up until after Avengers, once they get midway through Avengers, basically the end of the
He's in
second act.
Captain Marvel.
Yeah, and then Captain Marvel, they bring him back for
Which was great. Well, let's
Yeah.
not get too far ahead.
we're going 10 years down the line with that one.
Yeah, but Coulson, the importance of Coulson, it can't be understated.
It really can't. And again, we end up getting a TV show about his whole team, about how they operate.
And level 6.
Post Avengers, we get a show about how they operate post Avengers, post Phil Coulson's death, supposed death. But it's just it became more than what it was supposed to be. I don't think originally it was supposed to be such a long running character. I'm not sure if that's what they originally intended Coulson to be.
No, I would think not. I think potentially the death of Coulson was something that maybe, I don't know, Joss Whedon write the movie
Avengers.
Avengers. Yeah. Well, he
I believe Joss Whedon.
That's
got to
be
directed.
That's the end of Coulson right there in the movies anyway.
Yeah.
I think it really
But
made him the most important character in the movie. Really,
but it also made you want to look back. Like after he died, it made you want to look back at how important he was building up to that moment.
You're right.
But Joss Whedon also has like a penchant for doing that, for taking established characters and flipping the script basically, and that character becomes some sort of a driving force.
And Coulson has one of the best lines in the movie where Gwyneth Paltrow is finally like, she says something along the lines of, "We'll call the strategic," but he's like, "Shield, just call it Shield,"
just call
and
it
he,
Shield.
he named Shield, and
Because he originally dropped the whole name, and she said something like, "You guys really got to do something about these." So
work
we're
on
working
that.
it. But to me, this movie, again, I don't know if, I had reservations about Jon Favreau directing it, about Robert Downey Jr. being the lead, about why they chose this movie in general. And I have to say, like, looking back now, the importance of this movie, not just being written well and directed well and acted well, but the importance of these characters being established,
It's probably the most important movie in the franchise.
I honestly believe that this, above any other movie that's come after it, is the most important, because this is what starts it.
Yeah, think about it. If Iron Man sucked,
we
don't have any of this.
Yeah, they don't move on to work on the Hulk movie in association with Universal, because that's who owned the rights at that point. I think it was Universal or Paramount. I don't remember. I don't care. It doesn't matter. But they don't get to move on to that and tie them together, and then we don't get Thor and Captain America to tie it together more, and then we don't get the Avengers. I think Iron Man 2 came out before the Avengers.
Yeah,
because I think it was like Iron Man 1, Hulk, Thor, Iron Man 2, Captain America.
Yeah.
But we don't get any of that if this movie doesn't succeed, which is why I think if you go back and you look through the 20 plus movies, this is probably the most important movie of the entire MCU.
Without a doubt.
Do I think that it's the best movie in the MCU? No.
No, but it's one of them, I think.
But I believe that this is a mention in the top 5.
Yeah.
Because of the importance alone.
Absolutely.
And it establishes the perfect Tony Stark. It establishes Happy as a long-running character, even without Tony, because he pops up in the Spider-Man movies without Tony at one point, where he's just there. And we don't need Tony around for Happy to be around. We finally get to learn more about Happy, and he establishes himself as a character in his own right who can show up without being by Tony's side. Again, perfectly acted by Jon Favreau, because
he's great.
He's just and Gwyneth Paltrow being Pepper shows up again, where you realize that her and Tony are good together on screen, but there are times where she can show up where you don't need Tony around either. That's how good Gwyneth was in that role, and that's how well that role was written. And I think not just to stay true to the comics and to show like a progression, but well written for Gwyneth. Like, because they were like, she is Pepper, and they tailored more and more of it to her.
Yeah, I don't know if I know of another Gwyneth Paltrow movie where I'm like, wow, she's great. You know, and again, I'm not the biggest Gwyneth Paltrow fan.
No,
but,
before 2008, I may have watched one thing with her in it.
I mean, you guys will let us know, I guess. She might be amazing in some other movies.
Yeah, again, whatever movies she was in before this, it probably just wasn't the type of movies that I like to watch.
Exactly.
I mean, honestly, I'm not going to sit here and say that I'll watch anything. I won't. I only watch movies that, that interest me when I first see the trailer, or when I first read about, the description, when I read the synopsis of the movie. If it doesn't catch me...
We're not here to talk about Shakespeare in Love, goddammit.
No, we are not. No, we are not. You are in the wrong place for that.
You're in the wrong place.
Wrong room, goddammit. No, seriously. We're not here to talk about Shakespeare in Love. That's just not going to happen. Maybe you want to talk about Shakespeare in Love. I don't. I'm pretty sure he doesn't.
Go somewhere else.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, look, if you want to talk about
Iron Man,
Man,
we're just joking. We love you guys.
If you want to talk about Iron Man, we'll talk about Iron Man all day. Really. We'll talk about all the flaws of the character and the progression of the character and how he went from being who he was in this movie to being who he was in Endgame. Because Tony went through a lot of shit.
Even from Iron Man 1 to 2, you see a huge difference in Tony.
God,
you get, like, the more of the alcoholic demon in a bottle, Tony.
The demon in a bottle storyline.
In part 2.
Yeah.
You know, he's a party boy in the first movie, but you really don't see him taking it as far as he's taking it in the second movie. Yeah. You know, it's great character development, if you think about it.
Even going into Iron Man 3, which wasn't one of my favorite movies. I thought that
Me neither.
there were some good aspects to it. But even in Iron Man 3, with everything that he dealt with in the Avengers, Tony has PTSD.
I'm going to save all of my comments for Iron Man 3 because I am going to completely fucking trash that movie.
Probably, yeah. Again, there are aspects of every movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe that I like. That doesn't mean that I like them all.
Yeah.
I do have an ever-changing list based on how many, if I go back and I rewatch a movie and I find out that there's some little nuance that I like about it. But I have to say, Iron Man, other than the importance of it being what sets up the MCU and gives us, gives Marvel the credibility to keep making movies at that time, especially when all we had gotten so far were, Daredevil and the Sam Raimi Spider-Mans and the Fox-Men movies, and, a failed attempt at a Hulk movie. This movie is what takes us to now, we have this movie.
This is the comic book movie where it says, okay, this doesn't necessarily just have to be for comic book guys.
No, yeah, it's an action movie. It's just
anybody.
It is an action movie with
anybody
comic book
can see
characters.
it. We have friends that necessarily don't watch comic book movies and love that movie.
Yeah, and they do because I think first and foremost what they made this was an action movie based around comic book characters. They made this a fun, enjoyable action movie, and the comic book characters were secondary at this point. I think that they just used the names and they tried to get the likeness with the characters as close as possible. But I think that they also gave us a compelling storyline about Tony and about who he becomes just over the course of 90 minutes. From when the opening credits roll to when the ending credits roll, you get a very good character arc for one person. And that's the lead person, the person that the movie's named after, Tony Stark, Iron Man. Obviously there's always, there's cheesy shit in every movie, things that you wish that they would have changed or done a little differently. But to me, this movie ranks in top 5 in the MCU solely based on the fact that without this movie, we don't get Endgame.
I agree. I agree with that.
We don't get anything beyond that.
And I think I would put it probably 5 or 6.
Yeah.
But it's definitely one of those movies, for me, it's the cornerstone of the whole universe.
Absolutely.
It's the keystone.
Yeah.
You don't have anything else without it. You got to love it on that purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. This movie rounds out my top 5. So next up, we're going to go in chronological order. Well, from when they were released, not chronological order in the MCU. That would be way too convoluted and complicated.
Just we'll do them by release date.
Yep. So that was Iron Man 1. And, let us know what you guys think. What did you think of the movie? Did you like the change from Terrence Howard to Don Cheadle in Iron Man 2? How did you feel about Obadiah Stane, about Jeff Bridges as Obadiah Stane?
Let us know what we're forgetting.
Yeah, if we're missing any details,
I mean,
please
I'm
don't
sure.
feel free to call us out.
I'm sure there's something huge that, we're missing.
Yeah, Jarvis, Paul Bettany.
We talked about
about it a
Jarvis.
little bit,
We
but-
talked about him playing jokes.
But, yeah, artificial intelligence playing jokes. That's the first step to robots taking over. But no, seriously, Paul Bettany only lends his voice to this movie, and you probably could not have picked a better voice for it.
Oh, yeah.
When I think of Paul Bettany now, I don't think about some of the movies that he did before that, or really even outside of the
I don't
MCU.
really know any other movies he was in.
Neither do I. Not anymore. Because all I care about is Jarvis and the Vision. Because that's Paul Bettany to me
That's all
now.
that matters.
Yeah, pretty much. That's what this is about, is what matters. And that's Paul Bettany is Vision, is Jarvis. All right, so that was Iron Man 1. We're going to, again, do these in order of release date. So what's up next?
I believe it is Hulk, the Incredible Hulk.
The Incredible Hulk? All right. So
Yeah.
we're going to be talking about Edward Norton as the Hulk.
Yeah.
God save us all.
You see, that's already where we disagree.
Again,
We'll get into it.
yeah, we will. All right, see you later, guys.
All right, thanks, everybody. Remember, like, subscribe, like it all, hit it all.